Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good break here. Now, as we move into lesson 3 with our proposal management activities, we want to get your feedback on the kickoff meeting audio recordings. You have some fun with that? You may have done. Anybody like to comment verbally? I mean, you can go look at each other's comments in Shipley Online for things that you've identified. But anybody have any comments they'd like to summarize as to what you heard on the audio kickoff meetings?
The first call sounded like my first proposal experience.
Oh, that's hard. That's harsh, and I know that. Well, unfortunately, it's an aspect of planning and sometimes of lack of interpersonal skills. Thanks. Anybody else have any comments?
I think as painful as it is to listen to the not so good one, I think we've all been there, at some point, and just either we haven't been prepared ourselves or we've participated in a meeting like that, and it's just a little demoralizing.
It's hard to recover from something. You can, but it's hard to recover from something like that at the beginning. That's why we talk about planning for the kickoff meeting being very critical. Susan, thanks for putting your comment in the chat. Also, still leave it open to others that would like to speak. Susan said, I like that the call featured the immediate follow-up so people would know what to expect and that they'll be held accountable. I like that the call featured the immediate follow-up. Sorry, okay, that was a repeat, I apologize. Yeah, so it's an opportunity as proposal manager to communicate in one setting and then be able to follow up quickly after addressing any issues or questions or hot buttons. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll defer. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it sounded like number 1 was a disaster, and the combination of 2 and 3, seemed like the better approach all the way down to the PM not being a jerk. I think a person, you guys give out a lot of good tools, what have you, to be able to do the job well. But quite honestly, I mean, it's not to me, it's not necessarily the case. But if you're a jerk, people are, if you're up until midnight working on something, they're less likely to go the extra mile for a jerk than they are for a decent human being. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Which says a lot about or insightful about how we need to conduct ourselves as proposal managers, even if what I'll call bad Bob and good Bob, our internal thoughts kind of sound like bad Bob. We want to communicate like good Bob. And the point I want to make is that even when time is short, everybody's busy. If you were checking how fast that kickoff meeting went, a good one was under 15 minutes, covered a lot of ground in terms of providing information, providing direction, answering questions. So just to reinforce, even when time is short, if you've got, in their case, they had just a few days to respond, a well-designed kickoff saves multiples of the time devoted to it when you pull the people together. It's got to be worth doing. Thanks, Kelson.
Thanks, and thanks to all of you who have contributed to that. We all know some things that we can emulate to do better in those situations for kickoff meetings. Okay. Now I was reminded the end of the previous lesson that I hadn't asked the question that I was going to ask. If you remember these 7 characteristics, I was going to ask you, which one of these do you think has the weakest scores typically? Did you chat that in your window? Remember what we went through with these questions, and I can kind of back up a little bit here. So compliance, do you think this is the lowest score that happens? Addressing bid requests, strategy, competitive focus, responsiveness, quality of writing, visualization, or page and document design. So strategy, responsiveness. Okay. Across the spectrum, huh? Yeah, you'll be surprised. The one that scores the lowest, is the third one up from the bottom, competitive focus. We've come to realize as part of, yeah, that's true. Compliance is important as far as being able to bid. I mean, to be able to be in the running at all. So that's very important, and that should score the highest if we're looking at these characteristics. The one that scores the lowest with regard to what's put into proposals is competitive focus. We see often as we look at proposals from around the world, and over 25 years now, there's often a lack of it seems like the companies bidding know they need to be compliant. They know what they're trying to convince the customer to do with their solution, but it seems like they're bidding with blinders on, that they think they're the only ones bidding, and they're not doing anything to differentiate their offer from anybody else's. So granted, it's easier to do it that way because you don't necessarily need to go have or find information out about competitors and see what you can do to counter anything that they may be putting in. Or if you may be an incumbent, someone's bidding against you, what are they targeting with regard to you? So lots of things that that there are with regard to what makes a proposal effective, but the one that typically we don't do very well is competitive focus. Okay, Cindy, that's a great question. When you're a reviewer, aside from ghosting, what should you look for in regard to competitive focus? Hopefully, as a reviewer, you will have some information that will be given to you that you'd be able to use and look for, including win themes, theme statements, and anything that may show comparative value or proof statements to be able to validate what you're doing. We'll get to some of that a little bit later here, but it's a great question to address. uh, at any time in your company. Let's see.
Kelson, if I
Let's just
might,
pause. Yeah, let's just address this right now then.
yeah,
Thanks.
if I might chime in for a quick, short answer. What's important and what I look for in competitive focus, and I'm reviewing 2 or 3 proposals just this week, is information in the proposal that could not appear in anybody else's proposal because it's specific to that bidder. Could be could be about their people, could be about their past performance, could be something about the technical approach, could be something about benefits they've delivered in the past. And what's important about that, whatever it is that's unique, has to be languaged in a way where it's clear to the evaluator that only this company can make that claim. So if you're citing one of your contracts, okay, you're the only company that could do it, or has done that particular work for that particular client with those outcomes. So, that's what we look for. Otherwise, the proposal could be very strong on strategy, which is why pick us. But competitive focus takes that question to the next level, which is why pick us and uniquely us, nobody else. What do you sacrifice if you don't pick us? Now, that's not the exact language, but that's the impression you want to give to the evaluator, that it's going to hurt to not pick you. And usually the information and the foundation for that discussion is coming out of Capture. And it usually relates mostly, ideally, to the customer hot buttons, the things that are most important to them, and you stand out on the things that are most important to them. And that could be done with absolutely no ghosting. You're just heads and shoulders above because of unique characteristics that you offer. Kelson, thanks for that short window.
You bet. Yeah, I think that's important to be able to answer, and especially if we're trying to improve our proposals, and other things might be the same across those multiple proposals that the evaluator may be looking at. They're expecting compliance. It makes it really easy to throw somebody out if they're not. They're expecting that the writing is appropriate and you don't have speed bumps there. They're expecting that they should be able to find what they need based on your page and document design. They're expecting that you're articulating your strategy with those types of things. So looking at competitive focus and responsiveness, that relates to a better understanding of your customer and what they need, and having not only articulating that in the proposal, but also making sure that reviewers are aware of those things as well, and they can highlight that or recommend ways to strengthen that. Cindy, that's probably more than you wanted to hear, but thanks for the question. We appreciate that. Okay. Let's look at the components that we're going to address here in this third lesson. We're going to look at a couple of reviews. We've done kickoff meeting, talked about helping our writers do some planning, things like that. Now we're looking at pink team, other factors in writing between pink team and red team, things that we do logistically to prepare for submittal, and then activities that we participate in as well as proposal managers after we've submitted our proposal. On our roadmap, we're here at the tail end. Still a lot of work that actually happens in the writing process that we are participating in, but this is what we'll address with this final lesson today. Okay, proposal reviews. It's important to use a good approach, regardless of length or frequency or whatever, to be able to be effective in the reviews that we do. A little bit of difference here between decision gates, some of which you've been introduced to already as part of Capture. versus proposal reviews. So the gates are to make decisions about how to place people. They're led by leadership, so management making those decisions rather than those delivering or working with artifacts. It addresses business and strategic issues. They have these types of outcomes that may come from this gate. Do we postpone? Do we stop and don't come back again? Do we proceed forward? And then there's accountability assigned with regard to continuing forward or executing and implementing what the decision was from the decision gates. The reviews that happen during the proposal process are looking at the actual what's being included in the documentation to be submitted to the customer. So we're trying to improve the quality of the information that we have. Our participants are those who have skill sets and knowledge to be able to help us evaluate that information. We're looking at tactical components of execution on a contract, and a lot of outcomes may come from that. We may have things that are subjective comments, other things that are objective comments. And then those that carry out the adjustments or corrections to those based on those comments are the team of writers, you as proposal manager, so the people working with the deliverables. So there's a distinction between these two, and that we have one more decision gate left in this process. So the activities that we're talking about from here on now are going to be with respect to the proposal itself. So one of the things that we want to do, and as we do with any best practice, is we want to be consistent in the way that we approach our reviews. We want to take time to prepare. As proposal managers, we want to, for the ones that we are responsible for and the ones that we're talking about, we are responsible for preparing for them. It's important to prepare well, to do a good, be able to conduct it, lead it well, and then be able to collect the information necessary for response, whether that's responding back to those who submitted the comments or going forward with completing the additions that need to be made. So we're trying to make these reviews be effective. And so the guidance that we're providing as part of this lesson is talking about that. The first one that we highlighted on that chart for review is called the Pink Team review, maybe called other reviews. A strategy review might be a good point, but this is something that you own as a proposal manager to be able to facilitate early in the timeline. So we're looking at checking compliance at this point against customer requirements. We want to see if we are implementing the agreed upon win strategy, if the content that we have to review at that stage is in line with what we targeted with the win strategies, with the proposal strategies that we've prepared. And we're seeking to make sure that our sections are consistent. If there's some adjustments that we need to make, then we make them at this point early in the strategy area before actually getting to writing. So some of the components of preparation that it takes for a proposal manager, there are pieces that come together in we talked about the annotated outline. They may have provided some content in that structure. There may be other tools like storyboards or the proposal development worksheet that I mentioned. I didn't necessarily show that to you, but there are artifacts brought to the Pink Team for review. So in the packet that you've given to writers and contributors, they've taken that information and started to work with that content, not writing narrative yet, we want to make a check on what we're going to be including, what we're going to be addressing, how we're going to be addressing things, and making sure that the what we submit to that review is a consistent look at how we're addressing strategy, how we're answering the customer's issues without the full-blown details. So contributors are providing content, adding information into the version of the proposal that you're going to use or provide at Pink Team. You will be able to refine that information and presenting that to the team, including an updated version of the executive summary. So as you put those materials together, here are the things that you, on the left side here, that you would provide to this team. You'll notice that there's information there from Capture. So things that we're, again, trying to make sure we have messaging that's flowing through, and the Pink Team reviewers are not your writers. They are not people that have been specific detailed content contributors. You want people that are able to evaluate strategy and evaluate solution in a high enough level to be able to know that, yeah, we're on the right track. So you'll give them some instructions that will be provided. You'll show the evaluation factors. So lots of things that go in on that left side that you've already prepared as part of the instructions that you've given during the kickoff meeting to your team. So you'll update some of those things as needed, especially like with the executive summary, and your team will provide the outlines and mock-ups. The review occurs, and we'll show you a little bit later what some of those components are and approaches to doing that, with the intent of getting specific outputs. And these are some of the directions that you give the team. We want to know if our strategy that we're including in our proposal so far is appropriate. Are we on track? Do we need to make any adjustments? Do they have suggestions for additional content to include that will address the strategy components that we're looking at? For example, at this Pink Team level, one of our contributors may want to include a reference to a past performance example that is now outside of the scope allowed by the RFP. They may request that previous examples of successful performance be within a 3-year window. Well, if they're referencing something that's 5 years ago, we are not going to be able to use that in this situation. We might use elements from it in a call out or helping to tell our story, but we can't use it in our past performance volume. Things like that are valuable to look at this stage. So we've given you some tools and things like that to be able to look at. These are tools in particular that may be actually brought to the Pink Team. You get to designate in what format you want the content to come to Pink Team, whether it's in the proposal development worksheet, structured that way, or captured in the center one, which is a section planner. So in bullets, capturing the information that's going to be included, or even in a mock-up format, which is in a stylized template that has headings and maybe other components that would show maybe what the layout of the proposal is going to be in the future, what it's going to look like. So you choose what comes to that Pink Team for that review. Here are the components of planning and executing that. The organizer is the proposal manager, and then the people here on the team members are people that can review effectively and provide strategic feedback on what we've included and what we've submitted. Documents include those things there we're talking about before we showed on the previous slide. A couple of different ways to do this. There could be, with the virtual nature of how we operate and work a lot now, it's good to have the same time that all this information is set out. You have a call that you introduce what the pink team is, what their roles and responsibilities are, the information that you've provided to them for review, the timeline that they have to review, and turn them loose and let them know that you're available to answer questions, and then give direction about how you want feedback back. So that's an aspect of it. It could be that you get everybody together and you, especially if it's a smaller proposal, you may have a collaboration site similar to like what we're doing now and showing slides. We may be able to page through a couple of sections or whatever like that and have a discussion. That sometimes takes longer rather than having people individually looking at things and then consolidating their feedback. But it is a possible way. If we're able to be present together, we may do walking the wall. Many of you have probably done this before, where you've put up on a wall in a conference room or something, start to finish, what you have so far on a proposal. Again, we're looking at strategy, and having the reviewers then come in and make sticky note comments about different things, or compiling their inputs for use and consideration for making adjustments to where we are so far. In your toolkit, in the download, we've given you tools that you could use for conducting a pink team, including instructions about what to do and assignments, how to plan for it, a couple of forms that are used during the actual review process. So what could be what your team could use to provide comments back, etc. And then there's an in-briefing and out-briefing template, which is in PowerPoint, about giving that kickoff instructions as to what to do, and then the consolidation of the comments back. So some things that we're not going into detail right now to tell you how to do or how to use each of those things, but there's value, of course, in being planned, in planning this well and preparing this well, in communicating with your team to improve the quality of the feedback coming from your reviewers. Brad or Dennis, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, all good for me. Thanks, Kelson.
Yeah, just I encourage everyone to. Sorry, Kelson, it's muted. Just encourage everyone to get familiar a little bit with these tools, because again, some of us in this training are fairly new to this, and we need checklists. We need places to know where to start. If we're going to get a little more rigorous in our organizations about this early pink team, to really check out, make sure our strategy's in line, this gives us a really good starting point. So just encourage you not to be overwhelmed by these checklists and templates, but to use those if we need it as a starting point.
Great, thank you. And again, we're trying here to again, we still have the brakes on full bore writing. Our intent is to bulletize out, identify things that we want to include without necessarily going into that full inclusion, and seeing if that is going to be appropriate or sufficient, or will give us the information we need moving forward. That's why the planning aspect, both in proposal management and in writing, is so important. is to help us give that little bit of pause to get validation on the way forward, the strategy going forward, and then being able to let loose. And then we'll be in lockstep or in the right way moving forward. So in the timeline perspective, after we do the pink team, we talked a little bit in the previous lesson about things that we can do to help the coach our proposal contributors. One thing that we wanted to highlight as a foreshadowing of tomorrow is, as a proposal manager, you can encourage and coach your writers and contributors in a power approach to plan, take time to plan, help them to organize, write, use the examining part of what we're doing here. We just talked about pink team. That's part of the examining approach, and then revising. So things we'll be talking about in more detail tomorrow with regard to these 5 steps in the approach. We can encourage them and coach them at this point and throughout the writing. Notice that there's a focus on, as we've talked about planning, as we've talked about organizing, it follows the same approach that we're looking at for an outline. Writing, it'll get into a lot more detail tomorrow about who our audience is, the kind of language that we need to use, structure, things like that that are beneficial. Okay. So another way that one thing that we may be doing as far as having an annotated outline or some of the other tools that have been reviewed now at Pink Team, so we can go from that type of a structure into a mock-up or into the template or the template or style sheet that we'll be using going forward. And now you may choose to, if you have contributors who struggle to use styles and things like that in your template, then maybe you don't want to ask them to work within a structured document. You may want to ask them to just stay in the annotated outline and have them provide their content that way, and then have someone on your team, desktop publisher, or you yourself, to then bring that into the template formatted appropriately. So a couple of things that are of value going from an outline to a more representative page layout and look, we're including that here. So we allocate a certain amount of percentage space-wise for your title, for your introduction and the things that you want to include in that introduction. And then the bulk of your response and your allocation of space are the details of your response. So some of the instructions here we'll go over a little bit again tomorrow, but focusing on stating what we're addressing and stating benefits before talking about solution and features. Citing proof and using visuals to help us tell the story properly. Leaving 80% of your space for that, and then the follow-up 10% for summary activities. So when you're using a style sheet in particular, look at these 4 steps. So allocating page count, we'll go through each of these here in a minute. But there are 4 ways to be able to do it quickly. One is to establish the style, have that be consistent with your brand. You can use blank pages then based on the assignment that's been given by page allocation. You as a proposal manager have assigned people a certain page count, or it's been dictated even by the RFP. You provide that information, and then you can build out something to this that have the number of pages. And then you go from there in the second step to overlaying your outline headings on the page space that you have, estimating some space required as necessary. You may include, boxes for now for where specific elements might be or might appear. Make sure that you have the appropriate space at the beginning, at the end for those introductory and summary components. And again, this is part of planning. We're looking at creating a visual representation of the space that we actually have allowed to us in the page count that we have. So locate where you're going to put graphics and describe them. You want to include, best practice is to include a figure number and title and caption for each graphic, not just a number and a title, but a caption that helps to describe and explain why this graphic is of value to the customer, how it helps us in our sales messaging. And then you have theme statements and other call out information that, where is that going to be? How's that allocated? And the fourth step is adding keywords, potentially referencing what boilerplate you might use, and keeping things in a bulletized format to then be able to go and expand. So this may be something, if you have time, and you're probably not going to, but you could prepare even something to this level of detail to hand to a contributor or writer, and then they have a lot of background to go from to be able to expand on. Anyway, that's an opportunity then to go from the annotated outline to something that's more structured and in flow and will look more like the final product. So as you work through this process with your contributors, your writers, with the team, we come to that fateful day when we get to the red team review. Another essential review. Dennis talked about earlier, if he had to limit himself to 5 things that are most essential to do, he said this is one of the most critical. So even if you don't get to a pink team or not able to do a pink team, you definitely must do something like a red team. Peer review helps, yes, but there's real value that can come from a red team review. So what goes into that? We have a final proposal draft, or something that's nearly final, of all the components that are going to be submitted with our proposal. You're going to give them instructions and assignments, things like that, and in addition to the bid request documents and the compliance checklist. We're still using that compliance checklist as a tool to make sure we haven't slipped anywhere along the way, getting towards our final document. The red team takes these inputs and then creates outputs that we ask them to do. We ask them to predict the scoring of how the customer would score our proposal. So that's why we give them the bid request documents as well and lay out what the scoring parameters or requirements are. We ask them for a numerical score or whatever the score is that the customer may provide. Then we also ask them for qualitative information. Where are we strong? Where are we weak? How can we strengthen where we're weak? And any adjustments we need to make there. And have that be summarized, as well as documentation of findings if they've used, if we've asked them to actually look at the document and provide comments directly in. So there's a lot of stuff going in, but a lot of information. We provide them, the red team reviewers, their roles, their assignments, what we're asking them to do. If we're clear on that, it will improve the quality of the outputs. So what does the red team really look at? Here's some questions that they'll look at. So what's the overall message? Does it sell? Does it represent us well? Are we looking at customer focus? Are we clear? Theme statements. We'll talk about that in particular, how to write them tomorrow, but we use them in prime real estate on the page, and the space that we're allocating to them, are they used effectively? Are we helping with our sales message? How responsive are we? Graphics, are they clear? Are we using discriminators properly? Benefits. So as part of this red team review, the way that it can be conducted, it can provide us yes information in the context of the proposal itself with the sentence structure, content in those sentences, but also other metadata. Is it organized well? Do we are we active versus passive in our verbs? Are we compliant? So all these things that we can get addressed at a red team level that we've been working on and trying to do and work with our team, and it's valuable to have additional eyes helping us at this stage to evaluate where we're at, and put on the hat of the customer to see how close we are to meeting their needs. So a little bit about the preparation. As a proposal manager, you could lead this. That there are times when that has been done. That happens with some regularity, but it would be great to have somebody else take up that role for a couple of reasons. Number one, it gives you as a proposal manager time to be working other things in preparation for the output and getting your team ready to be able to move forward. And it also provides it helps. Sometimes when we're in a meeting and we're responsible for content, as questions come up, we want to jump in and defend what we've done or what our team has done. The customer is not going to have that ability to have us there telling them what we really meant. We want to make sure our red team is acting as well as they can, like the customer. So they're not going to have us there. So having a leader that is conducting these things, moving throughout, will get us the responses that are accurate from the team, are appropriate, and will really help us improve the quality of our proposal. So some things there that we typically do as far as what instructions are going to be given. A little bit about the execution. There are, an in-briefing, instruction about what to do, assignments being made, help them, get set up as to what they need to do, and then doing reviews. You'll notice that we have 3 reviews mentioned there. Dennis, would you talk about the value of a horizontal review versus the vertical?
Sure, glad to do that. And it provides a good sort of end-to-end check in several areas. One is compliance. Many red team reviewers don't get to the level of detail of an assigned person who's going to take the RFP, the compliance matrix, and the proposal and do a physical check of every little thing. So you want to make sure you get that. Another horizontal review, some companies use it. I encourage it as much as or as frequently as possible, is a strategy and messaging horizontal review, which is looking at themes, looking for and at theme statements, call out boxes, graphics or visuals, titles and captions, to see that the actual strategy messaging is clearly visible in the proposal, as well as checking that it's consistent with the intended messaging. So those are two that are really clear. And the third one, often played by a senior manager, is just looking across the whole proposal for consistency between one section and another. So for example, where we talk about the structure of our team and how different functions are going to be performed, to be sure that there's consistency, say, between the discussion of the organization in one part of the proposal, discussion of how quality assurance is going to be conducted in another part of the proposal. So it's to do that checking for consistency, that reviewers who are looking vertically, means an assigned section or maybe individual sections, won't get that broader horizontal view across the proposal. I'll also add that it's not as critical that the whole proposal looks like it's written in one voice. What is important is it looks like each volume, each chunk that's going to be broken out for, say, a separate review person or team on the government side, that each chunk is written in one voice, so it makes sense to that reviewer. So those are the keys about horizontal reviews. Thanks, Kelson.
Thanks, Dennis. Great summary. For those of you who have had red team reviews or something similar, what do you find to be most effective about them? Raise your hand or chat. Or you haven't had them. Realigning messaging, okay. Scott hasn't had one. You poor soul. No, I'm kidding. They're very, very valuable. Avoiding groupthink. That's a really good thing. Sometimes we get insulated in our ivory tower of sorts and maybe blinded to some things that others can point out. Great, thanks. Cindy, second compliance check, right? We're definitely doing that. Laura, they bring fresh eyes. Yeah, that's one of the greatest things, I think, for those types of reviews, is to have somebody else looking at something. And I've been close to it for so long that I think it says exactly what I want it to say, but someone else may say, what? And it helps us to craft and improve our response. So we're looking for gaps in our response. Thanks, Jennifer and Susan. Consistency, catching last minute mistakes. Great. Now you will see, of course, as part of this, the outputs will come, including some grammar and wordsmithing types of things, but not all components of the red team review are that. So we still want to make sure our messaging is right, and then other people can work on specifics and language. If they have recommendations, that's great. But we don't want to, and one of the things that I do anyway in instructing a red team, is you may have wordsmithing comments or ideas. That's fine, you can note them, but spend your time on these strategy components or acting as the customer, and then we'll address the other things as we go. So the output from that is the red team leader typically has helped the red team consolidate their comments into one form, and that's also very beneficial, rather than having 5 people sending you 5 different forms that are how do you distinguish between how you should respond? If they're consolidated, then some of that has already been addressed at the red team level, and you have 1 or 2 sets of instructions coming out of that. So then we adjudicate recommendations. Some things that they suggest are far outside the scope of what we're doing in this proposal. We can't do that and be compliant, or it's a different path than the one we went down. So, they're just some things that we, as proposal managers, help make decisions on, and we keep the red team commentators aware of what we're doing. So we assign and track action items. Another great point here is to keep the red team recovery group small. So if we've had 10, 5, 10, 18 people or groups contributing to our proposal, as we get to red team, as we're coming out of that, our recovery group are the ones that are going to be making adjustments or changes to this proposal. We're going to keep that group a lot smaller. So it may be 2 or 3 or 4 people. And that way it keeps our, everything is able to be more tightly controlled as we're going down this path. And we're not looking for additional inputs outside of that.
Kelson, just a quick sidebar comment. Some of us are from small companies and do even smaller proposals. Some are focused on task order type proposal responses. I just want to put in a plug for red team reviews, even on quick turn smaller proposals. And it could be, like Kelson just said, it could be as simple as, peer review, where you're giving very clear instructions to a peer or a coworker or something, but skipping this step and just calling it good enough, it's good enough, let's go ahead and submit. It can damage our brand, so we've got to be really careful. And I just wanted to put in a plug, even on short, quick turn, smaller proposals, this step shouldn't be, like Dennis said, this is one of a handful of key areas that we just can't overlook.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Okay, great comment and question, Margaret. What happens if there's a major disconnect between the message and the customer's needs or other issues? Man, that's hard to address and hard to deal with. Sometimes the expectation is you, as a proposal manager, you're told to fix it. That's really unfair and very difficult to do, and maybe even could be used as emphasis point about the need to have a paint team review or something that helps us check strategy as we go. Yes, it may happen, and as if you don't want it to happen on your watch as a proposal manager. You want to have those things vetted prior. I would have this, if you have to do it, you do it. Use it as a learning and a teaching experience to others in your company that we need to implement best practices that will help us avoid this in the future.
Yeah. Kelson, if I might jump in on this, because this echoes something I saw with a recent client.
Sure.
When you do your paint team in brief or orientation, consider building in guidance that reflects lessons learned from pitfalls on previous pink teams and previous red teams, without naming the guilty necessarily. But I now see customers beginning to call out in their instructions the kind of feedback they're looking for, the kind of feedback they're not looking for based on their experience. So it may be that, really good standing pink team guidance needs to be modified and tailored to fit the experience and patterns in the organization until some bad habits get overcome. Thanks, Kelson.
Great, thank you. Hey, and Morgan asks another great question. For those in in smaller companies, how do you balance bringing in new eyes with all the people who have to contribute anyway? One way to do that is to not review your own stuff. Have that switching things around for people to review different things. And if it's a flat structure and management is also contributing things along the way here, maybe what we do is we ask them to play a very specific role, so they don't, touch everything or get their fingers all over everything, and have them do a specific thing that helps with that strategy review or something like that. So good question. Thank you. Dwight says, do companies hire outside people as reviewers? Yes. If you're able to if you have connections, or if you have even people that might be part of your partners that you might be working with. But yeah, you can hire people to come in and be reviewers, either with proposal expertise and best practice expertise in that way, or with technical content expertise. So it's a good way to have a meaningful review by some knowledgeable people, and just have that be a short span of time and not necessarily consume your company. So that is true. That does happen, and it can be a good way to go.
Right. And Kelson, if I might add, that's a great answer to Morgan's question. When you don't have that many people who are independent of the proposal development effort, and we have a few clients who may only have, for example, 30 or 35 people in their whole headquarters organization, and they reach out pretty frequently to just get another set of eyes who are accustomed to how that company does proposals, knows enough about their offerings to at least give proposal best practices advice, even if those reviewers don't have subject matter expertise for the technical content.
Right. Yeah, great. Thank you. All right. So we have provided for you a toolkit as well with Red Team that gives you additional instruction, ways to plan for it, things like that. So as Brad was talking about, time permitting, allow for peer reviews to be able to help get to be specific, prompt them on what you want them to do. Don't just say, hey, would you take a look at this, but give instruction about what you're looking for as your feedback. So it's always great to be able to have another set of eyes. Finally, as far as the submission process, you can have a gold team review, which is basically the final review and approval at the end of the process that yes, we management are thumbs up, we're going forward, we're stamping our approval of this message to be sent to the customer. And if there are some tweaks that need to happen, obviously that you try to get those to happen as quickly as possible, but you're trying to have none at this point to be able to submit. Okay. There are just a couple more things that we're going to address as part of this lesson as we get into production and post-submittal activities. We're wrapping up to close to the end of the workday for East Coast. Let's take just a 5-minute break here, and we'll come back and we'll wrap up the rest of the course and show you what the final assignment will be, and be able to answer any other questions that you may have. So thanks. Let's take a break for 5 minutes. Okay, thanks for letting us take that little break. Final things that we'll talk about today with respect to proposal management are then getting to production. What's going to be required to submit your proposal? Of course, the thing that we're going to be focusing on is to submit based on what the customer expects. We need to follow the instructions given to us in their RFP for how to prepare it and how to submit it. If things are unclear about where they want the things, then that's something that we can ask them questions on early on. So as we go forward then, we want to make sure that we're not surprising the customer with what we're doing, unless it's in a good way, right? Anyway, so some things that are part of production planning. You may not necessarily have the staff to have someone that is in charge of production specifically or exclusively, but it's valuable to have someone help you as proposal manager understand what the requirements for submittal are going to be, and to help. This is one of those parallel tasks that can be going on during development, that there's a, if we can help people understand at the kickoff meeting how we need to put the proposal together, how it needs to be packaged, then that will help everybody understand the requirements along the way and have accountability. If we are submitting things hard copy, we want to make sure that we've got the supplies in-house appropriate to what we need. If we can get some things done, there may be a contracts document section or some other pieces that can be completed, reviewed, validated, and then produced and in the books, as it were, prior to some of the other things that are more strategic. It's good to run those things parallel. So we want to make sure that we know what the requirements are. We want to make sure, excuse me, that we have the information necessary for any reviews that need to occur internally, and then for final submittal externally. So 3 things that this person who focuses on production can help us with is to help identify what all the requirements are, what all the components are necessary for printing, assembly, and packaging, and then especially if you use a team that's external to your actual writing contributing team, someone needs to be able to help them, a separate the print shop or wherever you're doing this for printing, to understand what's necessary to put the response together and how to assemble it properly. So if you can have someone help you with that, even if it may be an administrative person, that would be very valuable to have someone else help with that kind of coordination. So as we're have the final doc, we have the approvals that we've received. We want to make sure that we are again completely compliant. We want to do a page turn, especially if we're doing a hard copy version, making sure that there are no print slip-ups or things that were missed in each of the books that we're putting together. If we're doing something electronically, we can also do that kind of a page turn, making sure that if we're submitting in PDF, for example, we can make sure that everything that was in our original document is reflecting appropriately in the PDF. If not, we need to make some adjustments, changes, etc. So you just want to make sure you do that kind of a check. Now, with the preponderance of the different types of submittal types there are, would you indicate in your chat box what percentage of your submittals are electronic versus paper? So the number that you'll put is reflective of how much is an electronic submittal of your total efforts. Wow, that's great. And I think that's a testament to the times that Okay, yeah, some of you are, have been affected by COVID. Honestly, I hope, go ahead. Morgan? Hello?
I'm guessing that was accidental.
I hope so. Okay. So, okay. So Dwight is on the other end of the spectrum at 25%. Yeah, there's a lot of, I think some things will continue to be paper for a while, but a lot of people are going electronic into portals or just, emails. Lots of different ways that people do it. Regardless, as the responder, we need to understand what the requirements are for response and prepare accordingly and submit accordingly. So here's some guidelines that we may see. Some of the things we've just talked about. Follow things exactly. Ask for detailed instructions if they're not provided. If they're going to be viewing on a screen, then consider the font size, type size, colors. You have to be aware of color blindness, things like that. Use a PDF format when allowed. To just make sure that all the content is consistent and repeatable. Try not to send too large files. They always ask you to check for viruses if you are sending anything. Test your delivery method. It's important to do that, especially if you are going to be file size limited or have to break things up into different parts. You want to make sure that you're meeting the size requirements that you have and the speed with which delivery occurs. For example, for those of you that may have used grants.gov for submitting your response, it is not good to submit 10 minutes before the due date, the due time. There are so many things that are slower with that, with everybody submitting, that they recommend that you submit a day before and make sure you have confirmation. So be prepared to submit on an appropriate timeline and make adjustments to your schedule accordingly. So there might be, you may prepare a checklist like this if you're doing something that's in print mode, things that you need to verify and validate in the production process as you go forward.
Kelson?
Yeah.
Just a quick comment. We need to make sure that we don't just assume, since we're submitting a PDF, for example, if that's how they want it, that it's going to be scored and reviewed on screen. Sometimes we make that leap and we think, oh, well, it's electronic submittal. They'll just pull it up and they'll review it on their screen. Not true.
Right.
It is certainly sometimes, but I was at a conference pre-COVID, but not very long ago, and there was there was a panel of, don't you love when you get a frog in your throat? Sorry.
Yeah.
There was a panel of government evaluators, and almost all of them said they do print hard copy, and that's how they ultimately review. So make sure it's going to print out okay, like you said.
Yeah, good point. Susan asks, is there normally a size limit that you should target for email submissions? If they don't stipulate that for you, I would ask, because you really can't project what the buffer is going to allow, especially with federal agencies. Commercial wise, you may be able to submit 35 megabyte stuff, but there you go, Nicole. Typical government email box is 10 meg. What about scoring software in regard to production? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Margaret. I'll confess that.
Kelson, let me handle an aspect of that one if I might.
Sure.
So if customers using scoring software, within that software, they may be using features to find certain words or phrases. So be careful about putting major portions of your content response into graphics, which will be images, rather than, for example, narrative or tables, which software can find the language in a table, will not necessarily find the the words in a graphic. Which is why also when you go to production, do your tables in native Word. They may look a little bit prettier if you're using graphic software. I had a client recently who was just sharing a lesson learned that they were found non-compliant on multiple requirements. And they replied to the government kind of befuddled as to how they could be deemed non-compliant when the responses were all in the proposal. And it turned out that the responses were inside of tables that looked really nice, but the software did not find the words of the answers. So that's the one piece of advice I could give from a production perspective when you know that kind of software is being used.
Great, thank you. Okay,
And if I
some other
might
great
add,
comments. Go ahead.
and if I might add, even if they're just using PDF or Word, you want to make it easy for content to be found. So just keep
Right.
that in mind. Great question.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Margaret, for your clarification. I apologize. I just had a brain freeze right there. So thank you for that. Other items about things that you could check with your proposal, things that you've kind of been evaluating and watching all along, but also some things that are applicable to next steps. Risk assessment, negotiation, and then transition. Having those people involved, and obviously in times of development, but also in times of submittal, to be able to go from there. So some of the activities that we may do, we may have to deal with final proposal revisions that come as engineering notices, or some other things that we need to correct or respond to or clarify with the government, or with the agency, or with any of our customers. We want to make sure that as we respond to those activities, that, or those open those notices or whatever, that they're evaluation notices. What did I call them? Did I call them engineering notices? Anyway, evaluation
You
notices.
did.
I did. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. We'll make those up too.
So you continue. You're still working within the instructions provided by the RFP, unless they give you new ones about how you can answer or clarify. So resolve them. Follow the instructions that you've been giving, and be cautious about where to make changes. It's not a carte blanche to just change anything you want in your proposal. They usually have targeted areas that they want responses in, and then make sure you continue to be in compliance. So another thing that you may participate in, or you may be asked to, your company may be asked to do, is to have oral proposals. So it's very important to do the same best practices that we've talked about through proposal development and helping prepare for oral proposals. So things that we based our proposal on, we're going to base the presentation on. We want to make sure that they are corresponding, that what is being presented in an oral presentation or in a demonstration matches what we said in the proposal. If they're different things, or if we've added some new things to the oral proposal that have not been in the other documentation or things we've provided them, we may run the risk of being non-compliant, and we definitely run the risk of irritating the evaluation board from what they're expecting. So you see some of the guidance there. Also, when we're dealing with oral presentations, there's some critical things that we need to understand. This is not a document that's just going to be sitting there and can be read and interpreted separately. It's something that we need to put thought into and execute and practice. So we plan, we develop the components, we look at how it's going to be delivered, delivery style. We even prepare for questions, and we make we put visuals together and understand what media to use, how to present things. We test technology that's going to be used, and we practice. We practice who the people are, the handoffs, the transitions. We practice how to answer questions, how to do things with body movement. Lots of things that will help prepare us as we are in a presentation situation with the customer. They may limit who gets to be there. And that's fine. So we work with those that are allowed to be there, and some people are comfortable in front of a crowd and making a presentation, and others are not. But they may need to be there as part of the key team. As proposal managers, we can help our orals team in preparing their documentation and helping them prepare their materials for their presentations, and then involve other people that can help in shaping the style and manner of presentation as well. Cindy asks, is it appropriate to use notes for an oral presentation? My only experience was with a PowerPoint presentation and a graphics portfolio. Okay, good question. It depends on, I mean, if you're, it's something that you could ask your customer if you're allowed to use notes. They may provide instructions specific to that. They understand that not everybody is smooth in being able to make presentations, but they want the people that are presenting to know their stuff and not just read off of a slide. So that aspect is also known, and be able to answer questions that show that they showcase that they are experts in what they're talking about. Anybody else want to make a comment about oral presentations? Thanks, Cindy, for that question. Okay, final things for a proposal manager after all this process is completed. We encourage you to seek for and document lessons learned. This comes in two phases, actually. One is we encourage you to, shortly after the proposal is submitted, to go through a process of identifying what worked really well, what may not have worked well. Those are the top two components of this chart, and to see what kinds of things might we be able to do differently internally. And then as we are interacting with our customer and they make decisions, we can request a formal debrief or any other comments that we may get from them. We can bring that back to the table and share that with the team, document those things, and then make some decisions about how to handle some things going forward, both for process internally and how we may interact with our customers in the future. So it's great to gather this information and share it, and then go back and use it as we are looking at our next proposals moving forward. There are just some ideas there for how to conduct such a review. And we have given you tools with which to do that as well. So in conclusion of our managing proposals activity today, there's a lot of work that goes into it, as evidenced again by the roadmap here. A lot of stuff happening. So what we're trying to do is help you understand that you can do some good work up front that will help to streamline the process going forward, that will improve the quality of inputs that you get from your team, will give you confidence and traction in being able to be successful and do a good job, and earn the support and trust of your team and your management. So Dennis has a question out there for any of you to answer if you'd like to answer. So a couple of summary keys to our successful proposal management. I'll put these up here quickly, but there's value in having the tools that you prepare for how to manage the process and things that are communicated to the team. It's important to continue to monitor compliance throughout. And as you become, since you are owning this process and ultimately the document, then compliance is really going to be at the heart of what you are trying to do throughout. Schedules are important. Communication is critical, especially with remote teams. And we encourage you not to guess. Ask not only of the customer through questions that you may see in questions that are raised in the RFP, but also of your team and others that you're working with. What do things mean? Let's get to clarifying. So balance your capabilities and skills and program management and understanding and project management, and also balance that with being an effective communicator, mentor, and coach to your team. Okay. Here's a summary kind of that question. I limited Dennis to 5 items, but here's some things that when time is short or when resources are scarce. Always read the solicitation. Make sure you understand what's being required. You'll see a couple of items there are consistent regardless of how much time you have. Compliance matrix, so you can evaluate and ensure you're compliant. Outline to make sure you give instructions that are clear to whoever's contributing. Pink team, get some strategy review, then draft, get that red team review, and then make sure you're ready to go for final approval and do your lessons learned. Things that we can continue to iterate and go through, but even when time is short, there's some critical things to do, having eyes on what you're doing and providing guidance to the team. Again, our EKG of the effective proposal manager. This one's a little bit different because sometimes there's panic going on, but there's no need to panic. We have tools and opportunities and instruction that we can provide in place, discipline to be able to carry forward effectively in our role. And highlighting what David said that we showed previously in the course, discipline and leadership are necessary, but they can be learned. So careful planning and accountability will help us to have a successful proposal effort. So I'll let you guys answer the question that Dennis has posted for tomorrow. I'm wondering if anybody in the group wants a short discussion on FedSim. So you're welcome to chat that response. Final exercise for this class, and looks like, Dennis, you're going to get your wish. We're inviting you to take a look at, well, we were inviting you to create a 30-day proposal schedule for this FEMA proposal. Document on that schedule what the tasks are that need to be completed, allocate time, and indicate as to where you're going to have your reviews and when you're going to do your delivery. So look at that schedule tool. It's there in the with that exercise. It's an Excel template. You can use that one, or you could submit a calendar schedule as well. But include the key components necessary for carrying out your proposal development. Allocate the time that you think is necessary for the tasks and for between reviews, and submit that. And that will be the final assignment for the managing part of the boot camp. And obviously towards the at the end, we'll ask you to provide any feedback that you may have on the course material as well. You don't need to worry about doing that today or tomorrow. Any final questions?
So the template has tasks in it for the overall proposal, but it says here using the transition approach requirement.
Well, if you just had to, yeah, that's confusing.
Well, you're not writing a transition approach response. You're using a 30-day window to respond based on all these proposal manager activities that are already, you're right, they're already listed on the template. If you want to add, if there's some type of review or process or something, that list isn't static.
Okay.
In the workbook, so you can add as many, you could delete them. What we'd like to see you just practice is manipulating, working in that 30-day window time frame. How would you schedule this activity out?
Yeah.
And use the transition. Yeah, you're right. Don't pretend it's the whole proposal, not just the transition approach. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
That helps. And yeah, that was my next question, whether we could add or delete stuff.
Yeah, certainly. Make it yours and make it reflect how you would schedule things for if you were given 30 days for a proposal response.
Great. Thank you.
If you want to do something you're working on within your company that you know is coming up, or take a pursuit you've worked on before and massage it based on what you've learned in this boot camp, that's okay too. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the case study.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. Is this exercise due on August 28th? I'm looking at the module and I see all of the due dates listed on there. Are those all accurate and up to date? I know I took my quiz last night, but I think that says it's even due August 28th or August 29th.
Yeah, what we did is we weren't forcing you to submit all the assignments necessarily on these days that we did the boot camp. So we know you have jobs or are doing other things, and so we wanted to give you some extended timeline to be able to submit things if you were pressed for time otherwise. So if you submit them early, great, not a problem. But it just indicates that the course will close for your submissions on that date.
Okay, thank you. Sounds good.
Thanks.
So do we have to do that other test, or what was that? The final exam is listed under there for the.
Yeah, for each of the three specific components of the boot camp, there is a final exam. So there are some more additional knowledge learning stuff to be able to do. Those are required. So there is one for the capture, there is one for this proposal management section, there is one for the writing section. Those are also due at that final date of August 28th, but they're relatively simple to do as well.
And
Thank
I would do those while things are fresh on your mind.
Yeah, it won't take you too long, and you can take it as many times as you want till you get a perfect score if you want, or you can just, you know, whatever you'd like to do with that. You're not limited to one time. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Kelson, I just want to preview for tomorrow, which is the third leg of this marathon, where we're compressing a whole 30-day or 60-day pursuit into a few days. We're going to fill in a lot of the gaps. Today, we walked through the whole approach to managing a response and the activities, the milestones, and some tools. And tomorrow, we will focus on focus on the message, really, and putting together a compelling response. And you're gonna see you're gonna see a little bit more what goes into some of these color team reviews and some of the best practices around messaging, compliance, and those 7 characteristics we've talked about. So just wanted to give that little preview that there's a lot of gaps still to fill in on how do we actually write and create and develop the proposal, and that's coming tomorrow.
Great, thanks, Brad. You will not need to put together a budget, Susan. You can breathe a sigh of relief there. Yeah, the assignment for proposal management is just a schedule. And if you want to submit the outline that we did earlier today and get feedback on that. Great, okay, that's all we have for today. Thank you very much for attending. Have a good evening. Continue to stay safe and healthy, please. We look forward to you joining us again tomorrow. And thank you so much. If you have any other further questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can send us emails in Shipley Online, and we'll get back to you. Thanks. Have a good evening.
Thank you all. Thanks, Kelson.
Thank you.